I haven't really said hello because I think I was muted. So, hi everyone.
Hey, Ellen.
Hello.
Hi. Hello.
And I think Janine and Janik are just joining us as well. Hey, Janine.
Sorry I'm late.
Hello, hello.
Hello. Yippee.
We've literally just all arrived, so you're not late.
Good.
Yeah, and that should be recording. Did it come up as a recording?
Yes.
Great. So welcome everybody. Especially welcome Linda. You're looking well in spite of not you haven't been feeling so good, have you? But you look great on not feeling so good.
It's just allergies, it's that time of year, and once the temperature is over 100 for a week or two, it'll all go away. So we're heading real soon.
And does it feel like it's clearing a bit?
I've been taking some medicine and that helps. Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you so much for being able to join us. And Beck and Sarah, I know you haven't made it yet. So welcome too. That's fine. We've just been like dropping in each week and doing the chapters group by group and having conversations about what stood out for us, what things are going on in our lives that resonated, and questions came up, Linda, that people were curious to ask you. So I wondered if it worked for everyone, what we could do is just go around and say a bit about how we found the book overall, share with Linda a bit about what it's meant to us. And then once we've done that, we could then take a second round to ask a question. Does that feel all right? And I just really wanted to start by saying, when I read your book, Linda, what I realized was what a huge act of generosity it is to write a book like that. And having kind of seen you at parts of it early on, when it was just like slog work, like
Right.
and determination and grit, but like reading those chapters and where you went to in terms of going back into your past and the detail, and then what that's invoked in me in terms of being able to reflect back on my past and put in detail and see the threads and see the leaning into the curves and the being the love or the being in the pain, and I just wanted, as I've been reading it, I've just felt so much love and appreciation for you for doing this, for writing this. So thank you so much.
Oh,
and it's a delight to have you here and to hear everyone sharing and to hear what you hear. And also, if you have any questions of any of us, that would be great too.
Okay. All right. This sounds fun.
Hi. Someone else is joining us. Sue's going to join us too. So having said all of that, I've said we'd all go around and say something, but would you like to start, Linda, and say a bit about being here and what that's been writing the book, or do you want to go after?
Well, I can just say thank you. Thank you for reading it, and many of you have shared comments with me individually in emails or direct messages or book reviews, which I really appreciate. So yeah, I'm just deeply grateful, and thank you, Kirsten, for creating the opportunity for me to be here. Good.
Such a pleasure. Thank you. So how about then we go around and people say a bit about how they found the book and what stood out for them in their lives in terms of the book and what's resonated for you about leaning into curves. Helen, you look like you're raring to go.
I'm raring.
You're raring.
No, I was kind of holding back because I often just jump in and then I think, oh, maybe someone else would like to start, but I'm kind of really happy to start. Hello, everyone. Good to see you. And yeah, actually, one of the things, I used to be a motorbike rider. So that was a real connection there with that world. And that sort of feeling, which is very clearly, it defined my youth.
Mhm.
I wasn't into really big motorbikes, but it was a way of getting from A to B from when I grew up. First of all, on the back of my dad's scooter, on the way to school sometimes, and then having my own little bike, as did my brothers. And I kind of, really know that energy of the leaning into curves thing from that direct experience on bikes and being out in the air and that traveling, and as a sort of metaphor, really great actually, and such a great title. And it's sort of, the whole sweep of the book, very fresh for me, the writing, very, I found it a real page turner. I read it quite quickly, and that was, very exciting to just be immersed. And we talked about that a little bit before. So many things about it that were very touching and beautiful. And I didn't look at any of the questions at all at the back whilst I was reading it, because it felt like I just wanted to experience the writing
Sure.
without a sense of, how that might play out.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I've even quite read all the questions since. we had, obviously, Kirsten had picked out a few thoughts, and as a springboard for some of the conversations that I've been able to be part of. I haven't been able to come to all the group meetings, but I suppose one of the things, and there's been a little bit of time, and a little bit of time since the last time I came. I don't think, oh no, we had a week anyway. We had a week gap, didn't we? When it was blank holiday and it was all too much. But on reflecting, really, one of the big things for me was about intuition, and sort of so fascinating that, well, intuition has been such a big part of my being, really. I mean the sort of sense of intuitive understanding, and how that's kind of motivated me and nourished me and supported me through my life, even from very young. But I didn't really know what it was, and I also didn't feel that it was of great value, because, or at least I don't think I did, because it seemed like other more important things were the way, we learn about, there were other learning things that maybe I wasn't quite so good at. And my intuitive self often seemed to know, in a quieter way, where to, I don't know, to kind of dig in and stick with what I wanted to do, or whatever it was. And I didn't really know what it was called, but for me, it was amazing to read about that sort of, the power that there is with that within all of us, and that it's, in a way, it's our true voice. And I sort of feel like it's in a way the voice of the true me, the true soul of me, and it's guided me. I know that it's guided me through so many experiences. So it was sort of very validating to read about your journey with that, and how you kept kind of coming back to that and talking about your understanding and how it was for you.
Thank you.
I won't go on, because I could just keep going, couldn't I? But thank you. So yeah, there we are. I'll leave it with that. How important that was for me in the book and in life.
Yeah, thank you, Helen. Lovely. Hi, Yannick.
Can I go next?
Yes.
Hi, everyone. Lovely to be here. I love the feel and the weight of the book. The cover had the most beautiful velvety, like I carried it around me and sort of hugged it a lot. It was a really lovely feeling book, inside and out. Like it was really, like, I just not stroked it, that sounds a bit bizarre, but like it was a lovely weight to it, and I've really appreciated that more than I don't think I've ever actually appreciated the feel of a book before. And for me, it was your descriptions of nature, and just your adventures just blew me away, and it was so inspiring. It was like, actually, I've got some of those adventures too, and I never sort of valued them.
Yeah.
And now it's like, oh, maybe I have done a few things. And hearing all your different stories was just like, just blew me away how incredible your journey's been. And the mirror effect of how there's, put value on my journey too. And I really appreciate that, because I never valued, I value my life loads, but it really highlighted, like, I would like to start writing down clippets of my experiences. So I'm really grateful for that. Yeah, so thank you. It's really nice to be here. And I haven't made it to this group so far because the timings don't work. So when it worked, I was like, oh, good, I'm in. Yeah, so thank you, Kirsten, for creating the space as well.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm just thrilled to hear all of this. Thank you, Helen, too, for the resonance with the motorbiking. You know, that was just such a big part of my life. Thank you, Sarah, for the comment on the cover. I just was so grateful that Poisey Bettinger was willing to do that. She initially said no, and I was crushed because I had in my mind's eye that one of her paintings would be on the cover. And then she came back and said, well, reason I said no is I've never done that before. Never done a commissioned artwork or something. And so she gave it a go, and I was just so thrilled with the results.
Yeah. Rich, really rich.
I love the feel and the look of the book as well. Absolutely with you, Sarah. Just magic. I don't know, just touching it, just looking at it. So authentic. I can't think I've read anybody's book that's been more authentic. I just felt your whole being, and you were not afraid to say what you really felt. So few people do that. It was absolutely magical. And yeah, the intuition, serendipity moments are just so special. And the other thing, Linda, is how much you remember the colors, the feel, the smells, the nature. I was in awe of that, absolutely in awe of that. So thank you. Beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll go next if that's okay. I'm probably just going to say almost exactly the same thing that all three of you have said so far, because you're going, oh, I was going to say that. So I'll say it, but I'll say it to Beck, not as Helen, Sarah, or Janine. But I'm going to start with kind of what Kirsten, thank you for making the time to come and join us, Linda, because like we've all kind of, everyone said so far, it's a really authentic book, and it's clearly speaking to all of us because we've made the time to be here. So that's really precious, and thank you for doing that. I am Sarah, sitting here stroking the book off screen, and I'm not ashamed that I'm doing that, because I agree, it feels gorgeous. And I the same. I was walking around the house. I live with some of you will know, my auntie and my sister. So we bought one copy between us, but because I'm the fastest reader, I had the honor of reading it first. And I did walk round from office to kitchen reading it. I'll just flick the kettle. So I've read that too. a bit like Helen said, I'm not a motorbiker, but my partner is. And so I go on the back of his motorbike. And the very first thing he said to me was, hold on and just lean when I lean. and so as soon as I saw the title of your book, I was like, aha. And it also gave me a beautiful excuse to go, look at the title of this book, dear. It's all about, well, it's not about motorbikes, but it kind of is. And he said to me tonight, are you going to talk about motorbikes? I might mention them because that's, yeah, so that spoke to me straight away, which was really nice because we have been on adventures and I've been on the back of his bike a few times.
How cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I loved it. And it was always, for me, that was a real contradiction, because I'm the sensible one in my family. So, you know, the minute I bought motorbike gear and went on a motorbike, they were all like, the heck, on a motorbike? That doesn't fit. and that for me has been similar, I think, to some of what you've shared. That came out of understanding who I am on that really deep level, that I'm not just, you know, I am the sensible, but that's not all I am. That's not everything that I am. And definitely, like I think everybody said so far, the intuitive part of your story. And one of the things that really resonated the most for me was the connection with church and with faith and with God. I was brought up in a Christian-based church, and I actually left, and one of the reasons I left that was for the relationship with my partner. He wasn't in the church, so we weren't allowed to be together. And so part of our relationship and our journey has been that decision that faith and God isn't contained within a church, and that was really powerful for me. And a bit like I think Helen was saying, that intuitive way of knowing something wasn't given any value for me. Growing up in the church, it was, you know, you read the Bible and that's all. You're not allowed to have thoughts of your own. You're not allowed to. But I always knew instinctively there was more than that. And one of the things in my family, I'm known as someone who finds things. I can find, you know, if you've lost something, I have an instinctive way of finding it. And again, as a kid, that was really played up, and people, oh, I've lost this, get back to find it. And then as I grew and became an adult, it was just forgotten. It was put to one side. And that has something I've really been playing around with that in the last sort of 3 or 4 years, is that intuitive ability, and not just finding things, but anything at all. Like there were so many examples in your book of where intuition came through. But I've really loved getting back in touch with that side of me, and your book really kind of spoke to me. Yeah, that's happening for all of us all the time, and it will come through in different ways, and it's just us having the eyes open for it. So that really spoke to me, and that's been really helpful and beautiful. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. So touching.
Who wants to go next? Yannick?
I can say something, yeah. Sorry, I was a bit late. I had to shove some dinner down my throat that took longer to make than I thought. So it's like, I don't want that being filmed. So yeah, sorry. Yes, as you know, Linda, I've already said that I loved the book. And I did find it kind of like a lot of things have been said, like a page turner. And I love the short chapters. It's like, more chapter. Okay, I can read 3 more pages. Like, oh. And yeah, your descriptions, your narrations, I guess it's called maybe in English. Just, yeah, painting both nature and other things, and like also has been said, like your memories of the things, so that you actually can paint it so that we see it. Yeah, just be your honesty in a lot of it. I'm sure there's some things that you haven't said, but I know you've said a lot of things, and a lot of things that probably a lot of people would have not maybe wanted to have out in the public. And I love that you did that, because it makes it relatable, and you can sort of recognize things from your own life, or if it's not the same thing, it's still oh, well, she's not perfect either, at least, or their relationship wasn't perfect either, or she had those kinds of thoughts as well, or, you know, she did bad things too, or whatever. It makes it normal so that we know that we're not alone. And what more? Yeah, and I love all the little intuitive things and the different places where you have sort of drawn spirituality from, which I like as well. Yeah, your experiences with that, and the premonitions, synchronicities, all those things is just, it's exciting to read. And even though my own are not as clear as it seems that yours are, it's still like, oh yeah, and then kind of you get reminded, and then maybe, oh well, maybe I should listen even more carefully more often. And yeah, and it was fun to, I mean, it was a page turner, even though I knew what was happening, because I already know you and I know a lot of your story. But still, I wanted to like, ooh, turn the page and see what's happening and read about that. Is that coming soon? And I don't know, and just getting to know you even better. And like I said the other day, you're a pretty cool chick.
Thank you, Danica.
Shall I go next?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, much the same as everybody else that said, Linda. And again, thank you to you, Kirsten, for organising the book group, because it has been really great to meet and you know, share our reflections as well. But no, the book was absolutely fab. For all the things that people have said, I love the short chapters. It made it really readable. I mean, I said before, I often read at night, so short chapters was really helpful. Not too many times of dropping off at the, you know, I could see to the end of the book. But incredible, the whole spectrum of your life, because, you know, I've kind of encountered seeing you through being on stage and presenting, and it's the whole range of all of everything else that happened, you know, the things, your practical ability, you know, when you were in your house and you were treading on snakes, and, you know, central heating systems weren't working and you were cold, your tremendous energy to, you know, when you were training, all the hoops you had to jump through, you know, traveling all those distances to keep, you know, the different aspects that you had to do to support yourself, as well as running a family, the humanness, you know. I think when you talked about the day when Jim went on and off, when you went camping and he left you and went off for the day, and, you know, I've had a similar experience myself this weekend, you know, where the people just, I know, you know, that was yeah, very relatable. But I think as well, you know, that intuition and your religious background, that was obviously very, very throughout the whole of the book. But, and equally, you know, when you went and had some of your sessions you had to help you, you know, there was very much about the spiritual energy and the other side. And yet when you met Sid, it still seemed as if you had a kind of a struggle to accept the simplicity of what he was saying. And, you know, the number of times you hear that, and I sort of was almost thinking, well, you've had all these, that I was surprised by that in a sense. So, but no, and I think it, you know, it just makes it, you know, very relatable, because you that struggle that sometimes is, as your insight becomes deeper and your knowing becomes deeper, it's, you kind of toss it a little bit, don't you, from side to side. But no, thank you, and thank you for your honesty. Certainly your life has been full of adventure and yeah, just so much, so thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you.
Shall I take up where Sue left off, and the other Sue? Sorry to be late. I'm having a really bad technical week where I've upgraded my Microsoft email, and if you delete one part of the message, it deletes the whole thread, which was why I'd lost you. I've got it back. So it's all a learning curve. So I'm really glad to be here, and thank you for joining us, because it's really good to be able to question you. But it's kind of I was the same. I think a number of us in the group have just read, through quickly, and for me the short chapters were terrible, because I'd be lying there at midnight going, I could just do another quick chapter. Like 3 chapters later, I really must go to sleep. Whereas if it had been longer, I wouldn't have bothered. So the Netflix show that ends on a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
Really should go to bed, but stay up just one more. So it was lovely to just read the whole book, and then to go back and for the book club to read the questions for those chapters, and then to read those chapters with the questions in mind is great. And I found that it was such a simple message, the leaning into curves, and such a simple message to be able to tune into for me about we talked about this, and I think in the last group we had, it was about the leaning into curves, having ridden a bike myself, and letting go of the resistance. So because it's normal to resist the curve, and just leaning with it is great. And that's also a simple message to kind of pass on to people. I was talking to my sisters about it on text, and one of them just got it immediately. So right, so that's fine. And then when that happens, when there's no resistance, then intuition can come in. So it was a glorious story, and an amazing information that you passed on, and a fantastic read. So I must get around to putting an Amazon review on.
Thank you.
But thank you for writing the book.
I'm resisting the urge to talk and just trying to take it all in.
Carola, do you want to say anything?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love the book. I'm slightly regretting now that I just read it on Kindle. I didn't buy the physical book after hearing everyone talking about it. And again, it's a bit like, it would be nice to have the physical book to just go back to certain bits of it, which is harder to do on Kindle. I like sometimes to just open a book and read a few pages wherever it opens. So yeah, I might just have to get the hard copy of the book now as well. Yeah, I love your intuition. I've always been pulled towards listening to you for your sort of intuitive sense of things, because sometimes I feel my intuition and sometimes I get confused as to, is that intuition? Was that just an idea? Or I override it? And I think you very much follow what comes up for you. I love how you're spiritual rather than just religious and following the dogma. I was brought up Catholic as well. My mum goes to church every single day, and yet manages to worry about life more than anyone I know. So it's like she does all the right things, but she just doesn't feel relaxed or anything. And there was something in the book that I took from it, how almost you took the good bits of the religion, and whereas I almost resisted threw it all out years ago, and feel a great resistance to organized religion. I definitely believe in God, but I don't believe there's just one Catholic God, and if you're not doing it right, you're going to hell, which is what my mother would tell me. So, she worries for me along with everyone else. So yeah, I love your openness, and and just, yeah, just being true to yourself, really, living a life true to yourself. And I haven't always done that, and since the 3Ps in the last few years, I'm doing more of that, but I still get that resistance sometimes, or that fear. So yeah, I think it was a beautiful book. Thank you. And thank you, Kirsten, for organising this. I haven't managed to make it to many of the sessions, but I love that they're here and I can come when I can.
You're welcome.
Thank you. It's quite an experience to just sit and take it all in. Thank you. A lovely experience.
I wanted to, can I kick off with a question?
Of course.
I've got a few. Other people have a go. We'll just do one of my several. And I think what I was struck by was the depth in which you went back into experiences in your life, and the depth, the way you were able to explain the grief with Jim, and the anxiety with your daughter. Then talk about the love alongside that, and then the challenges you faced around the decisions you made. What other people have pointed to in terms of your practicality or wildness. But I guess one of my questions is did it change? Did you discover more about yourself in the process of writing the book? And what's that been like? What were the elements of that?
Yeah, a lot. And it's still ongoing, I think, even as I'm having these conversations. One of the things that I have been asked to think more deeply about than I did when I was writing the book, and it is, I think more than I appreciated when I was writing the book, I realized that people experience intuition and intuitive knowing differently. That there are some people who really do feel it as a gut sensation. I don't. I realize that for me, it's more of a mental knowing. I don't even know how to quite explain it. There's just a mental certainty, like my mind resonates with something, and I absolutely trust that. Others have talked about it being more of a heart thing, like just a sensation in there, a really strong feeling tone. Some people have talked to me about how they get visions. I do sometimes, or that they hear things. I actually hear things more than I get visions, but I do sometimes. And so I think that even in the next book, which I'm working on, that's something that I'm going to just try to bring forward a little more, that people can experience it in multiple kinds of ways, and they're all really valid based on the uniqueness of each of our human persons and bodies. And I think one of the biggest things was the first drafts of the book were, I think, significantly less emotional than some of the later drafts of the book. I think one of the things I realized about myself as I was writing was that, and I've kind of always known this, but I didn't know why or how to explain it, that I'm a real good reporter of facts. I do remember those memories really clearly, and I kind of wonder, since so many of them are like flashbulb memories for me, whether I was given those deliberately so that I could write this book. So that was one of the reasons that I was here, was to share something about intuitive knowing through some of those stories. But when I first wrote them, there was a lot of focus on what are the details, what do I remember, who do I remember about the people, what do I remember about the people. But what I thought was really not as deeply embedded as it is in the stories now. And that took several iterations. It took my first editor, who knew nothing about the principles, nothing about my story, saying, there are multiple places where I really was, well, how were you experiencing this? And then my husband read it and said the same thing. Talked about what everyone else is experiencing, but where were you in that? And then Jules Swales, the story editor, she just really kept nailing that, you know. And so every time I would go through and edit it, I would have to think more quietly, what was I thinking and feeling? And I don't think that is that I don't want to share my emotions or that I'm unemotional. I just think I'm far more centered on what other people are thinking and feeling than what I am. That's just my nature. And I have to really, like, even in the moment, in the present moment, I have to go inside and really kind of like focus and think, what am I thinking and feeling? And sometimes I don't know until I speak it out. And it's in the speaking out that I actually go, oh yeah. You know, like, I think Bill functions as a sounding board for me. So often I don't know where I am with something. I think that's part of being a super intuitive person, is that your own, if you really have that, and I think some of us maybe have more of a, maybe that's part of the function here. You, in a way, if you really are really super in tune to your own inner emotion and inner experiencing of something, and your own thoughts and feelings about something, that's going to get in the way of your really receiving what other people are experiencing. And that I don't go there, I think is part of what keeps me open to in the work that I do. You know, I just am able to take in what others are experiencing, run it through fairly purely, and say, here's what I'm hearing, or here's what I'm intuiting, or here's what I'm knowing. If I was a really determined, a defined person inside, I think that would be more difficult. So I just feel like I've learned a lot about my own intuitive capacities and how they work, and that'll get fed into the next book, so that I can say more clearly to people, hey, there are different ways of understanding this. There are different ways of experiencing this, and they're all really, really valid, and they're all useful. So don't judge yourself and say, oh, Linda has so much of this. I have a lot of it in a certain way, but I think other people have more in certain other ways that I don't have. I think I'll attend to that more in the next book. And I think even my relationship with Jim, not so much with Bill, I think, but with Jim, my understanding of it has evolved a lot through the writing. And, you know, I think right now, as people have reactions, there have been some negative reactions. That's been really helpful. I've learned about myself. How do I take that in? And how do I appreciate people's separate realities? And what do I make of that? And, you know, just allowing it. I think that's been a huge growth point for me, is just allowing and not taking personally what other people, you know, think and feel about anything that I've said. After the book went out, when it was loaded, and I knew, I did have a couple days of extreme anxiety, thinking, oh shit, I talked about masturbation. Oh shit.
Yeah.
I talked about my sexual relationships with my husbands. Oh shit, people are going to know that I used to not be able to go to the bathroom. And why did I talk about all that stuff? I truly did have a couple of days of like, oh, really regretting that. And then I thought, you know, who if I died tomorrow, you know, who would give a shit? You know, people are either going to realize that I was really making an effort to be transparent, and that's all part of it, that I just see all of that as part of human life. And why should it be okay for someone to come to me as a therapist and talk to me openly and honestly about those same kinds of things, about all their deepest, private, most secretive, fearful, shameful things that they go through, but I can't own my own? That made zero sense to me. So I think I will say this, there were some, and this was a learning experience, and then I'll finish on your question. There were some things that I left out of the book that may make it into future books that are important, but I left them out of kindness to certain people who I knew would have a very difficult time.
So interesting.
Yeah.
To hear the layers of what you discovered. Yeah.
Someone said something about valuing their stories. Sarah, and writing your stories down. And I just really want to encourage that thinking, because I think sharing our stories is so valuable. I just recently am reading, one of my clients just experienced the death of a mother, and she's been sharing poetry about what it's been like for her to go through that, just personally with me. But I every time she shares, I think, wow, her sharing made me bigger. It opened me more deeply to the human experience and to touching what it is to lose someone over again. And I think, that's, anytime we can do that sort of sharing out of generosity, it can do more good than we know.
Does anyone have any questions? Or any other reflections?
There's one thing that I actually kind of just was wondering. I think it wasn't it when, was it when your father or when your father-in-law died with the top hat?
Oh, that was my father. Yeah.
And where it seemed as if you all heard him speak, but he was in a coma. So you all had the same sort of intuitive hearing at the same time.
That actually wasn't an intuitive hearing. He actually just did speak out of the depth of a coma. We were in the kitchen, and he had been in a coma probably, it had maybe 24 hours. He was pretty comfortable during the day. At night he would get really agitated for some reason, but he hadn't spoken or communicated. And we're in the kitchen, which is, it was about halfway through the house that my mom and dad lived in at the time. So it was around the corner and down a hallway. It wasn't like he was nearby. And the door was actually partially closed. It was a beautiful summer afternoon. And we were in the kitchen discussing that he had asked my mother to get a top hat and buy a blue dress, a dress with blue flowers, which she did. And my mom said something like, I wish I could get him a top hat. And I said, well, I think we probably can. There are costume stores that we can rent them. So let's call someone. So I called this costume store, and the man said, well, what size top hat would you like? I didn't know they came in sizes. And so we're kind of whispering, and I say to my mother, what size does Dad wear? And clear as a bell from the back room, he yells, 6 3/8 or 6 7/8, whatever it was. And we're like, what? And ran to the back to see what was going on, and he was comatose. But that was not a situation where we heard it in our minds. We really heard the voice, all of us, from the back of the room, and just kind of went, what? Wow. And I mean, people have different spiritual beliefs, but my thought at the time was, a lot of people who have near-death experiences, like Anita Morjani, for example, talk about how when they're in the process of deciding whether they're going to transition, they're flying around and they're hearing conversations. And I think that's what was happening. I think he was in a transitional state. He was probably moving back and forth out of his body. I think he was right there with us, but he was still able to be in his body and come awake and use his voice to say that. So
Pretty amazing story. I mean, it would have been amazing. I was like, did he actually speak? If so, that's amazing. If you all heard, like, you all intuited that or whatever, that's pretty amazing too. And like, but you just moved on from that. Like, what was that?
yeah, funny. I don't remember that being like, I don't know. When I think back on that memory, I think all of us kind of went, whoa, that's really weird. But we were more focused on, yeah, Dad really does want this, than even thinking about, well, that was a really strange experience. It was like, no, we really need to get this top hat. So I don't remember if I put this in the book, but I know when we actually went to the funeral, when you walked into the room where he was lying in state, right at the entrance to the door was a beautiful stand, beautiful flower arrangement, and the big top hat. And then they played polkas over the overhead speakers through the whole visitation period. And people would walk into this funeral place. You expect these slow dirges, whatever, and they were playing these really bright beer barrel polkas. It's like, this is really strange. But we felt like we honored my dad's request that there be a party on his leave taking.
Why do what everyone expects, right?
Right.
I don't know whether I've got a question, but I was really glad when you said that in the next books that there would be more of the emotional content, because for me, I would have loved more of that. I was forever going, I want to know more about what was going on in your head and your guts. So it would be really interesting. So is that really hard to write?
I think not for everybody. I think for me, like I said, I think so often when I'm listening to experiences that I'm having or listening to people, in a way, I'm not there. Whatever the ego is not there. I'm just in the moment, in the experience, as I experience it, of love listening. And so I don't have a lot of thought about how am I thinking about this? How am I feeling about it? It's what's going on with you. What can I take in? How can I be helpful? How can I listen? That's just the way I'm built. I don't think that's a negative. For so many years, I thought that was a negative. When I wrote my dissertation, dissertations, the format that I use has 4 chapters. First chapter was literature review. Second chapter was methodology. Third chapter was what did you learn? What did the data tell you? And then fourth chapter was what did you think about your data? I breezed through the first 3 chapters, and mine was a qualitative study. I did life history interviews with a number of clinicians and wrote a 400-page dissertation. But when I got to that last chapter, what do you think about this? I struggled. And I always thought there was something wrong with me. What is it that I can't just really talk about what this means to me or put it together? And my dissertation advisor finally, I mean, we went multiple iterations, and finally she just said, Linda, I think we're just going to have to say that this is good enough, because this dissertation is amazing and it's going to pass anyway. Let's not sweat this. And I always carried around this feeling that somehow I missed the boat, that I was deficient because I couldn't do that last chapter to a standard that I knew it should meet. But now I don't think that way. I just think that's who I am. Is that for me to, I don't really care what I think about a lot of things. I'm more interested in what does everyone else think. And then as I process that, I can get closer to what do I think and feel. I think in the next books, I don't know even if it's going to be that I'm going to be more disclosing emotionally. I'm not sure that I know how to be or can be. I don't even know that that's built into my makeup. But I will be even more open about some of the experiences that I've had. I mean, some of the things that I don't think of as particularly shameful, but that other people do. So, for example, in my writing class, one of my writing last poems I did, I was emulating the poet Charles Bukowski, who's really raw, visceral, but he's kind of sardonic and sarcastic, and I'm not that. But I wrote a poem about the elephant in the room, and I talked about the fact that at the end, right after Jim and I separated, we were not fully divorced. We never did divorce. I had 2 affairs, and I learned a lot from that. I learned a lot. They were remarkable men, and yet I didn't put anything about that in this book because there were certain people I wanted to be careful of their sensibilities right now. And I also one of them, there was another woman involved, and I wasn't sure. I couldn't really get clear on whether she was still alive or not. And as it turns out, she's not. And so I just didn't want to say anything about that. But those coming to terms with myself as a betrayer, and later had a big impact on grappling with and forgiving when I was betrayed. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so I think there are layers of honesty about situations that I've experienced that I think I will push myself a little more in the next one to just go ahead and lay it bare. I also probably was affected to some degree by sensibilities within the 3 Principles community. Oh, should a spiritual teacher be disclosing that she did XYZ? Certainly spiritual teachers don't do those things. Well, after the 3 Principles community decided that I was not okay because I consulted an external coach when I was having, a struggle, I just got reached by, well, I wrote the book that I thought was really honoring of Sydney Banks and really honoring of the 3 Principles community, and am still considered an outcast in the community. So if that can be the case, it's just I'm so aware, much more aware over the last months that, separate realities are very real. They're more realer than I realized when I was writing this book. Mm-hmm. That every one of us to some degree makes a bit of a mistake in thinking that everyone is moving through the world in the same way we do. And there are no 2 people who are moving through this world even remotely alike. Mm-hmm. And for us to surrender our stories and our knowings because someone might not like our reality it's crazy, because there's no one who can be us. Mm-hmm. And there's no one who's going to think exactly like us. And so if we're just really honest and really true and really authentic, then it increases the likelihood that someone else is going to be that for themselves. Mm-hmm. You know what? It's really okay to be me. It's really okay to have been through everything I've been through. It's really okay to have made the decisions I've made. There is no judge after life that's going to say, hell, heaven, purgatory. this is heaven as it is. And when we embrace that, oh my gosh, the freedom. In a way, I think one of the best things that's happened to me is that the Three Principles community booted me out. Because it's like, yeah, you know, that's okay. I'm not here to be loved and liked and approved of anyone. I'm just here to learn from my own journey and in my own journey and in my own way, step up and be loved more and more and more and more. And it has to begin with self-love. I always love that Sydney Banks said, you know, if you only have a penny of love in your pocket for yourself, you can only give a penny away to someone else. But if you have $1, you have $1 to give. You have $2, you have $2 to give. But it begins with self-love. So if I can look at my whole life, everything I've done, all the elephants in the room, and have love, oh, then I have so much more love to give away. And some time ago, I heard someone say that a Hay House editor said, the more personal a book is, the more universal it is. And I love that. And so I'll stretch myself to be even more personal. And you know, and try to do as much as I can with kind of like, well, what was it like for me to go through those things? Share that with people, not because I even need that for myself, but because I want to increase that likelihood that people will connect with the story and say, oh, it's okay to be me. It's okay to have done everything that I've done. It's a learning laboratory. Everything I've experienced is allowable, even the most unforgivable thing, because that's what it means to be human. That's why we're here.
So would I'm conscious it's 5, and I'm wondering if people are able to stay on a bit longer, or did people have to, Linda, what's your time like?
I have a client at 9:30, which is another half hour, so I'm good for another 20 minutes.
Oh, great. Thank you. Cool. One of the questions I had that I think, well, I don't know, it might relate to, I think it relates sort of to what you talk about. And I was really struck by what you said about slowing down to the speed of love. And those chapters in Virginia, West Virginia, when the snow came down and everything slowed down, and not dissimilar to COVID, being COVID for some of us. It's like, then it was kind of easy, not easy, but easier to see the pace of love, the slowdownness of love. And what I was curious about is it always that you slow down to the pace of love? Or does love have a pace that's not about speed? And I wondered if you could speak more to that pace of love you point to.
That's a really interesting question. So I will share this with you. I submitted the book to Kirkus Reviews, which is an independent review organization. And you pay, I mean, an ungodly amount. It's like $500 to have this organization review the book. And I think it would be fair to say that the person who ended up reviewing the book didn't like it. And actually, sort of, and that's being reviewed because the review was so inaccurate. I just submitted it back to the organization and said, I don't think this person actually really read the book. And I need to have these technical inaccuracies fixed before I can use it. But it was interesting that person picked out some of those chapters, and it was clear, like, why would you put this chapter about us being snowed in the mountains of West Virginia in the book? I mean, what a silly chapter, right? Well, I had questions about whether certain things should be in the book, and when I hired I hired a woman who had edited New York Times bestsellers to do the first editing job. I paid her a lot of money because I really wanted a non-three principles, someone not involved with that community at all, to be able to read it and say, this made sense, or what are you talking about? Or, just to get a really good objective read. And I told her, I said, I don't know about some of these chapters, like this chapter about slowing down and, being in the, that was such a beautiful experience in my life of just recognizing how different our lives are from the lives of people who were 100 years ago alive, because their lives were so much more oriented to just taking care of business, trying to keep warm, trying to cook, trying to keep your clothes clean when you don't have a washing machine. And that was such a huge learning experience. Well, my editor said, there are things in the book that people are going to have a lot of emotion about, like the death of your husband, or that you left your daughter for a while. You need to have some chapters in there that slow the pace down, that give people a breath, that make them reflective about their lives. So there actually is more of a substructure in this book than I was even aware that you think about when you're writing a book. There are some very deliberate things that were done to create an experience of like peaks and valleys. And so no, I think when life speeds up, love is always there. And I think it's possible to stay more awake than I used to stay when life speeds up. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I find more and more that I am observing from a place of love when life speeds up. I'm less likely to be, just in it. I am able to maintain some kind of detachment, and that helps me respond better. But I do like I think about the first story with Jim. I was when I met him that day. Was it what is that? The second chapter in the book, or no? It's the first chapter. First memory is the second chapter. I would say at that point in my life, I was very much in my head. I was very shy, very anxious, and nervous a lot. So I was kind of sped up in that sense. But I was aware, I was very conscious when he touched my hand that it was like life went into slow motion. Mm-hmm. And all the thought, I couldn't have explained it to you because I didn't have the principles to understand thought, but I was aware that all my thought had fallen away, and that I was literally living in another dimension. So I look for that experience, and I look to go to that place where I know how to create that experience, because I think it's just easier to hear where love wants me to go when I'm quieter. And I think some of those experiences, like that month on the hill, taught me that. Probably the biggest experience of that was after Jim died. And 3 months in, I'm like, people who have a sudden bereavement almost universally talk about this phase they go through where they're like trying to make sense of it. If only I could have done this, if only I could have done that, if only this would have happened. I would think, oh, if only Jim had changed the tires on his car, if only he had not taken a different car, if only I'd decided to tell him not to come, it was just like, mm-hmm. It doesn't stop, because your brain is just trying to make sense of it. And then there was a point, and I don't think this was of my own volition. It was just, oh, like the brain went, okay, this is never going to make sense. It is never going to make sense. And then I lapsed into this quiet. Now, I think Elizabeth Kubler-Ross made a bit of a mistake, frankly, when she talked about numbness. I think there is an element of numbness when you lose someone anytime, but especially maybe when it's sudden. That I did experience a small degree of that, but I think what a lot of people are actually experiencing is quiet. And it feels numb because their usual emotional processing is not there. But for me, it was more of a space of all that is irrelevant. And I was just in this incredible quiet. It was the most incredible quiet I've experienced in my whole life. And I love it when I go back there, when I touch it, where I just have this feeling of moving through life very slowly and very quietly, with not a lot in the way of it, just observing and watching it stream through me and finding beauty and experiencing love for it. That was a gift that I look to try to get to. And one of the places I get to it is in my work, when I'm sitting with someone and there is just that presence. And again, I'm not sure, Kirsten, that's the way everybody experiences it. That's just the way I experience it.
Yeah. And that slow down to the pace of love really resonates with me, and it's slow down to the pace of life as it literally is. And like literally in the movement of a cell or something, like that speed, and you like to really feel into the experience of existence and aliveness. And I think we can do that in extreme emotion as well. I don't know, but I feel like there can be a quietness in great sorrow, a quietness in great anger, even though they seemingly are very different. Yeah. And I just love the invitation to slow down to the pace of love.
Yeah, and that, I think that idea came from the title of the book by that name, by I think it's Joe Bailey. He wrote 2 3 principles books. One is Slowing Down to the Speed of Life, and the other one is Slowing Down to the Speed of Love. But they were early in his own journey, and I think he saw that he really evolved even farther beyond those. So he doesn't really promote those books anymore. But Richard Carlson picked it up in the book, his books, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. I don't know how many of you know, but Richard Carlson's father, Don Carlson, was a very dear friend of Sydney Banks. He actually underwrote a lot of Sid's life financially during a period of time when Sid was trying to write his books and wasn't making a lot of money. Don and his wife, I can't remember her name, really sweet lady, really helped Sid out. And so Richard Carlson was very deeply affected by Sid. And I think in some of the early editions of Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, he mentioned Sid and then took that out later. But he was really very deeply affected by what he learned from Sid and popularized it in those books. One thing I've been asked that's really interesting, I'd be interested to hear if any come to mind for you. In preparing to do some advertising on Facebook and Amazon for the book, the person who's going to help me with that, who's a marketing expert, advertising expert with Amazon, said, well, what other books are like your book? What other authors come to mind for you who write about the same things or write in the same way? Or so that I'd be really curious about whether any of you think about books that you think, oh yeah, this is kind of like I can't think of a lot. The one I can think of is Bittersweet by Susan Cain, that I really love, which is not so much storytelling, but very much speaks about finding beauty in suffering and beauty in difficult circumstances, and being able to look at difficult things through the eyes of love.
The one came to my mind was Eat, Pray, Love. Is it Eat, Pray, Love?
Yeah.
That I came to really late, like only this year.
Liz Gilbert's book. Yeah.
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 Obviously it was of its time and a couple of decades ago now, but that sort of just frankness with her journey, what she went through, and that spiritual discovery.
Yeah.
I thought maybe a little bit similar could be also Light is the New Black from Rebecca Campbell.
Oh.
She has a couple of more books as well, but I think those are, it's been a little while since I read it, but she does talk about her life and how she had experiences that were spiritual, but no one else understood. And then how she got into being a spiritual sort of guide or things like that. So maybe a little bit similar. We could.
Yeah, I'll look at that. Rebecca Campbell?
Yeah. I think it's the first book, Light is the New Black.
Thank you.
I don't know about anyone else, but I felt like following your journey through meeting from Christianity, from meeting the Karunas. Karunas, is that how you say it in Hawaii? And what you discovered in terms of you had a technical term for it, I forget, but like indigenous peoples, like their spiritual understanding and how you brought that together, and then how you write about the three principles and how you explain that really struck me, like really hit a chord for me in a way I haven't heard up to now. And one bit, and I just stuck out this quote because it made me go, oh yeah. And you write, the more we realize we are manifestations of this intelligent, conscious, and creative energy, the more we harmonize with it, rather than with our identity, which we make up with our gifts of thought. And for me, on this journey of like, what is this universal intelligence that I am, that everyone is? And what is it that like gets in the way of that? That just really touched me. And yeah, really makes sense in terms of what I'm exploring in my life right now, and the renaissance in psychedelic therapy, and yeah, ancient wisdom, if you like, and how it comes through in our day-to-day life.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I remember in the book I talk about how that moment was Sid. In that moment with Sid, when we were standing in front of the religious themed painting, he said to me, in the end, all forms will pass away and what will be left is truth. And recently, it just seems like different things have fallen into place. People have handed me books, or I found books. It's coming in multiple directions that people are saying we are on the verge of a moment in time where we are going to embrace all lineages, the Jewish lineage, the indigenous lineage, the Hawaiian lineage, the Catholic lineage, the Protestant lineage, you name it, all the different lineages. We're going to embrace the beauty that they brought, but we are also going to claim the universal truth. So it isn't that we have to, that's what I love. It isn't that we have to dishonor what's come before. We can honor it and honor that it was doing its best to point us in the direction of what is behind life. But what we're on the verge of right now is being that. Being that oneness, really, really knowing that who we are and that the truth can only come from one place, and that's within each of us.
And I think in your book, Linda, you've just illustrated that in such a beautiful, clever, really clever way that there's definitely, well, I think for everyone spoken to our hearts, and I'm sure we'll ripple and speak to so many more people's hearts as well. I'm looking forward to my daughter reading it in time. Yeah. So I'm conscious of time and wanting to honor like 20 past. So just if anyone wants to share anything before we go or say anything, then now's the time.
I mean, I was just thinking then, Kirsten, when you were saying that you were looking forward to your daughter reading it. What about your sons? Do you think it's a kind of man, you know, are men responding to it in a good way? Linda, you know, have you got a male readership going on out there?
You know, what's so interesting is the person who was doing I was doing some coaching with toward as we were wrapping up the writing and early publishing process, really encouraged me to get male reviewers. So Michael Neal reviewed it, Dr. Mazaza reviewed it, Andrew McKee. I don't know. There are as many male reviewers, and I was really surprised that they reviewed it as strongly as they did. There was only one person really who in the end, after he read it, refused to do a review, and it was a male CEO. I think he was really a little scared about putting his name on a book that talked about intuition, you know, so he just sort of But it is interesting that I have had a number of men tell me that they are reading the book, but I have had 0 men review it on Amazon or Goodreads.
Yeah.
Very interesting. You know, and I know there isn't, I know it isn't about negativity, because I've had some private conversations or private emails saying, I'm really loving the book, I'm really learning from it. And but there seems to be something about putting themselves out there that is hitching for men.
Yeah. Interesting.
My husband's keen to read it, but I haven't let him have it yet. She handed it over. I'd be really selfish with it. I'll go and be a bit more generous.
This is kind of interesting. I have heard obliquely, not directly, that a family member who is male has had a somewhat negative reaction, bothered by the fact that I was so explicit about some of the sexual relationships that I've had. That's really, I think that is just, you know, really, really fascinating that women by and large have just been more like, oh, that, you know, so open. And for men, it's bumping into something.
Yeah.
They want to be explicit ones of those things, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. You know, Steve Hardison read it, Steve Chandler read it. You know, these are well-known men, and very, very male men, and lovely men, and we're very honoring and open. And so I don't want to say that all men are having, you know, no reaction, but there is something. There is something that is, which, you know, in a way it makes sense, because a lot of spiritual teachers, I think about Caroline Myss and Clarissa Pinkola Estes and Mirabai Starr, a number of women who are very active. Tara Brach, what is her name? Tara Brach, I think, have noted that 70% of their clientele are women, and have said, where are the men who are spiritually evolving as well as we are, because it's happening for everyone. You know, how can we make it easier for them to step forward? And so maybe it's coming.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all. I need to finish and get ready for my client, but I'm just so moved, so thrilled. Thank you. And if it's in your heart to share the book with friends, let them know that you liked it, or review it on Amazon or Goodreads or on social media feeds. I really would love to give it legs, not for me, but for the message.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us, Linda.
Yeah,
It's really
thank
lovely.
you.
Thank you everyone for coming at this time. And there's one more next week, so we can do the final bit then. All right. Lots of love.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.